Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we're going to be diving into the Dwarf's Arcane Journal for Warhammer Old World. So this is something I got my hands on a few days ago thanks to a subscriber of the channel, and I thought I would dive into it with you guys and talk about the new rules. Now, I will say this off the bat, just a fair warning, some of the stuff in this Arcane Journal is extremely powerful, and some of it, not so much. So we'll go into what's really powerful, and, obviously there's going to be quite a bit of that, but we will also talk about the things I don't think are that strong and that, if anything, are kind of more on the narrative side of things. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So first of all, they have new artwork for the Arcane Journal, and I have to say, not a fan. I just want to say that the artwork looks a little bit, it just doesn't remind me of the old kind of dwarf artwork, and I think, it very much is telling of the direction that GW wants to go with their art. I'm not a fan of it personally, but of course, I love dwarfs, so, in that regard, it's okay, but, I do think that the artwork could be a little bit better. At least more, grimdark, but, kind of the fantasy version of that. Now, we're probably going to skip over most of the fluff, but I think this was pretty cool. Ungrim Iron Fist, who, by the way, is a beast in this. I have read up on his rules. Call forth the throng. Now is the time for vengeance. I love dwarfs, honestly, and I'm so glad that they actually got an Arcane Journal as one of the first armies. Children of the Ancestors. So let's just kind of go right down to the rules, because a lot of you guys, as much as I love the lore of the dwarfs and stuff like that, a lot of you guys aren't here for that. You're here for the rules. So we're going to go straight down to that. As far as the colors, right, you got Krak Norn, Karazakarak, Barakavar, which, by the way, I don't know why I think that it's probably because of the Total War games that I think they're purple or should be purple. But I think that's just because Warhammer Total War probably got it wrong. I was always a fan of Krak Azul, but that was just me. I was a Krak Azul player. At least my dwarfs are painted up like that. Okay, let's go ahead and get down to the rules. So, and I think it's really cool that they did this like mission and stuff, which is awesome, right? 3,000 points, battle, storming of Kazed Vosk. That's so cool. Really awesome. So yeah, they got the dwarfs in all their glory. The Goblin Hewer is back, which is really cool. And you got a few other cool things as well. You got Doom Seekers right here, which are just, when I go over Doom Seekers with you guys, you will be in heaven. If you are a lover of Slayers, you will absolutely love the Doom Seekers. They're exactly what Slayers should be. You got the return of the Dwarf Cart, or Dwarf Pony, which is super cool too. Can't even believe this made a comeback and actually has rules and stuff like that. That's absolutely ridiculous, and the rules are actually good for it too. It's not just awful. Okay, so, you got your standard dwarfs, got Ungrim Iron Fist. By the way, really cool model and really powerful rules as well, so we'll dive into him. Got kind of a close-up of a Doom Seeker. Not sure how to get a hold of these models, but really cool. I actually think you could probably just proxy for like a normal Slayer. Just call him a Doom Seeker and call it a day. I'm sure not a lot of people would mind. Okay. Alright, now, the first thing you guys should know about the Arcane Journal, it comes with two specialized different kind of army builds that you can have. And the first one is the Dwarven Mountain Holds. Now, I'm going to say this right off the bat. The special rules for these, armies are so powerful that I think you're better off just going with one of these armies if you want to play competitively versus playing a standard dwarf list. That's probably my only complaint, is that I think, your basic, old world dwarfs, the original army muster or army composition, I should say, from the original, Forces of Order, it doesn't have any real benefits except you can take everything, right? Like that's the only benefit, is that you're allowed to basically take everything. Whereas you're a little bit more limited for these armies of infamy, but the bonuses you get are so good, it's almost like you can build around that and still have a very powerful list that's, going to be more powerful than, anything you could have gotten in the Forces of Good book, or Forces of Order, excuse me. Okay, so let's talk about the Dwarven Mountain Holds. First of all, you need a king. King or Thane is required. And this is kind of like, it's not a big deal. It means that you probably are going to spend a lot of points on characters if you try to go for a dual Anvil of Doom or something like that at 2k. I don't think you need 2 Anvils of Doom at 2k, but you can definitely go for that. It's just really expensive. You're heavily investing in characters at that point. But a king, an Anvil of Doom, and possibly a Thane with a BSB would be perfect. There is a new unit you can take called Royal Clan Warriors. I will talk about those. They're basically Longbeards with a couple of differences that we'll go into. You can take Longbeards or Quarrelers. No Thunderers in this. No Rangers in this. No nothing for core. Well, yeah, you can't take those other units for a core choice. For special choices, you cannot take any gunpowder stuff. So no cannons, no flame cannons, no organ guns or anything like that. But you can have a bolt thrower or a grudge thrower. You can also have hammers in the dwarf cart for special. So the dwarf cart, you can't have the minor carts, but you can have the bugman's cart, which is really good. And we'll go into that as well. For rare choices, you can have Rangers, Iron Breakers, or Iron Drakes. And personally, sorry about that, personally, you're going to take Iron Breakers in this list probably every time. I think they're personally one of the best units. However, hammers do give Iron Breakers in this specific build a run for their money. As for your mercenaries, you can take up to 4 Doomseekers and 1 Goblin Hewer. Now, you can also take Imperial Dwarf Mercenaries, but truthfully, you might as well just take Dwarf Warriors. In my opinion, there's only one build that I could think of with Imperial Dwarf Mercenaries that would make them worth taking. And even then, it's a little bit iffy. They are subject to the misbehaving mercenaries rule, but there's a way you can get around that, and I'll talk about that a little later. And of course, you can take a single standard or battle standard bearer with a Thane or a Runesmith as well. You're never going to want to put it on a Runesmith, just FYI. That's a terrible choice. You definitely want to put it on a Thane, because a Thane is tougher, it's going to survive longer, it's going to deal more damage for a very similar cost. Okay, so let's talk about the special rules that you get if you follow that force organization. So first of all, you get something called Ancestral Fury. During a turn in which a Royal Clan Army unit makes a charge of more than 3 inches, or a follow-up move, it gains +1 to its strength characteristic. This is massive. So if you're charging in, your great weapons on your Longbeards and Hammers, you're going up to strength 7. If you're, your regular warriors, you're going up to strength 6, which is a major buff. It's basically +1 to wound in a lot of different cases. And this is not only for charge moves, but also for follow-up moves. So once you're in combat, you win combat, you can follow up, and then you're going to get +1 strength still. Very good. Riches and Heirlooms allow you to spend more points on runes. So basically, you can spend an additional 25 points on runes for your characters, which is pretty good. It opens up some different combos for you, which are, pretty powerful. And it also gives you 25 additional points on standards, which is also really cool. So instead of 50 points for a standard, you can get up to 75 points. Now, that sounds really good, and it is if you're taking certain rune combinations with your standard bearer, but normally it's not going to be that big of a deal. It's really only a big deal on one unit in particular, which is Hammerers. And other than that, it doesn't matter too much. Lastly, Striking a Grudge. So this is basically you pick an enemy character. Every single model in your army gets hatred against that character. And you score additional victory points if the nominated character is slain, has fled the battlefield, or is fleeing when the game ends. So that's just great, right? And the funny part about this is that you can combine this with things like Doomseekers, which must issue challenges under certain, with certain abilities and upgrades. You definitely want them in challenges as well. The Doomseekers are just absolutely brutal in challenges for their points, and I'll go into why later in this video. But yeah, being able to kill an enemy character more easily with hatred, and then on top of that, you have 75 bonus victory points, that's huge. And I guarantee you, if this hasn't been happening already, this army, the Royal Clan, is going to be very competitive in, serious tournament play. Okay, so let's move on. Now we go to the next Army of Infamy, which is the Dwarven Mountain Holds Expeditionary Force. So if you wanted to field an army of artillery and thunderers and gunpowder, this is basically the way to do it. And it's very strong. So, characters, 50%, you can take an engineer or have to take an engineer for your general. This is fine though, because there's a special character engineer which has leadership 10, which is really good. You can take only one Demon Slayer, Dragon Slayer, so not very many of these. And I'm guessing this is just to kind of represent the odd Dragon Slayer, Demon Slayer who they meet upon the road on the march to war, and they just say, hey, you want to come with us? It's like, yep, trying to search for my epic death, and that's it. And then you can take Thanes or Runesmiths. For your car, you can take Dwarf Warriors, Thunders, and Dwarf Carts. And Dwarf Carts, you can take the Mining ones or the Bugman's ones, I guess, according to this, which is really good. The Mining ones are good, but I think the Bugman is probably a little better. You can take one unit of Rangers, and you can take a Scout Gyrocopter, which is a special unit that you can only take in the Expeditionary Force. As for your special choices, you can take, of course, the Cannon, Grudge Thrower, Bolt Thrower, Miners, Scout Gyrocopters, and normal Gyrocopters, so kind of the same thing, but you can't take Hammerers, and you can't take Slayers, normally. In your rare slots, you can take up to 33% of your army, which is more than the usual, of Gyro Bombers. You can take one unit of Slayers, so I was wrong on that. You can take a single unit of Slayers. And you can take up to 2 of these War Machines per 1,000, so Organ Guns and Flame Cannons. I'm just going to tell you guys right now, with the way this army is set up, Organ Guns are absolutely insane, and so are Cannons. They're both extremely good. And I'll go into why later in this video. You can take Mercenaries, up to 2 Doomseekers per 1,000, a Goblin Hewer for 1,000, or Imperial Dwarf Mercenaries. And your Engineers, as well as Thanes, can take a Battle Standard Bearer. This is probably the only case where you'd want to take an Engineer as a Battle Standard Bearer, because you want to save points to have more Engineers in your army, so your army can have better shooting and kill enemies quicker before they get to you. But yeah, still Thanes are still good Battle Standard Bearers as well. The special rules for this army are pretty good as well. Not quite as good as the, Royal Army special rules, but still good. 1 unit of Thunderers per 1,000 points may be upgraded to Expeditionary Marksman for a point to model. And these do not suffer any negative to hit modifiers for moving and shooting. In addition, Dwarf Engineers may be upgraded to an Expeditionary Marksman for 10 points as well. So this is extremely powerful. Obviously, normally Dwarfs handgunners suffer -2 to move and shoot. These guys don't even suffer -1. Right? Do not suffer any negative to hit modifiers for moving and shooting. That means any, That's very strong. So they're hitting on 4+ at short range. And there's another buff that they can get with the special character, which I'll talk about, which can actually negate even that. So yeah, the Thunderers in this force are extremely good. Form over function is another, in my opinion, almost broken special rule. So when you're writing your list, you can reduce the toughness characteristic of the following war machines by 1. Cannons, Organ Guns, and Flame Cannons. So no Grudge Throwers and no Bolt Throwers. So you're probably not going to take those anyway in this kind of list. But yeah, you can reduce their toughness by 1. Any war machine that has its toughness reduced also loses the move or shoot special rule. And most of these weapons do not also have cumbersome, so that means they're only suffering a -1 to hit for moving and shooting. Again, may not seem that good, they're only movement 3, but sometimes 3 inches can save you from being charged the next turn, and you can still shoot. absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. That has never been the case, I don't think, for dwarf war machines. The ability to move and shoot dwarf cannons and dwarf organ guns and flame cannons. They also have an additional rule, subterranean assault. If your army includes miners, then after you deploy, you can set up two 32mm round miner markers, and instead of coming out from the deployment zones, your miners that are held in reserve can come out through those mine markers as long as they're 6 inches away from an enemy unit, 3 inches away from a special feature or objective marker, and 12 inches away from another friendly mine marker. So, and you can't also be in the enemy's deployment zone. So what do I think about this? Well, I mean, I think it's good. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's that good. It's one of those like, it's hit or miss. If you're taking a unit of miners, which you probably will, in this kind of list, just because you need something to come in behind enemy lines, or you need something to come in to kind of, block an enemy unit from charging you or getting around you, it's useful in a way, but it's also just not that good because you also can't charge the turn you come in anyway, so it really doesn't make that much of a difference. But it is still cool. It's cool to have options where you deploy. All right. So let's talk about the special characters that you get. First of all, Thorgrim Ulriksson, Carl of the Damaskron. First of all, if you guys don't know, this is young Thorgrim Ironbrow. Or no, excuse me. This is young Thorgrim Grudgebearer from the Total War games and from the, kind of old Warhammer Fantasy, the dude on the big throne. This is him as a young Thane. So he is a Thane, he's fielded as such, and of course in the Dwarven Mountain Holds army, you can include him, and he counts as your one Thane. He has leadership 10, he can indeed be your general, by the way, so you can use him as a general. He's toughness 5, strength 4, 3 wounds, so he has just as many wounds as a general. Weapon skill 6, slightly less weapon skill than a normal general. He does have also, I think, slightly less initiative, but 3 attacks, which is still good. He has a hand weapon. He has the Grudge Settler, which is his weapon, the Grudge Stone, and the Armor of Skaldur, and a shield. Grommail Armor, Grudge Lore, Hatred, Orcs and Goblins, Magic Resistance -1, Rallying Cry, Resolute, and Stubborn. Okay. So, most of it's the same as a normal Dwarf Lord, but Grudge Lore gives your unit hatred against all enemies, first of all. That's insane. Now, he has to set the Grudge Stone, though, first before you get that hatred special rule, so let's talk about the Grudge Stone. Grudge Stone. At the start of any turn subphase, he may use the Grudge Stone. Once set, Thorgrim and any unit he joins gains Unbreakable and automatically passes any panic checks they're required to make. However, once the Grudge Stone has been set, his unit cannot choose to flee as a charge reaction and cannot move other than to give ground and to make follow-up moves or reform. So it's basically like the old rules for the Grudge Stone, or the Oath Stone, I should say. It's the old rules for the Oath Stone. Once it's placed, you can't move. But you're unbreakable, which is pretty insane if you think about, putting this guy in a big unit of hammers and just stringing those hammers out. Maybe you got 30 hammers in there, so you got maybe 15 wide and 2 ranks deep. That's going to be a really hard thing to move out of the way. Right? Unbreakable hammers are going to be really strong. So, he has the ability to essentially turn hammers into a blender. He has the Armor of Skaldur as well. The Armor of Skaldur gives you, I believe, 4 upward against Killing Blow or any wound suffered by an attack that has the multiple runes special rule. It is heavy armor, though, which is kind of weird because normally you would think that it would be full plate, but it's not. It's just heavy armor. He does have a shield, though, so there is that. He basically gets +1 to his save anyway. And his weapon is Grudge Settler. So Grudge Settler is... so this is really good. So Rune of Parrying gives you a -1 to hit, I believe. And then Rune of Smiting gives you D6 wounds on your attack. So Strength +2... He's going to be striking at Strength 6, most of the time Strength 7 because of the Army's rule. AP -1 with Armor Bane 1, but again, Rune of Smiting is really powerful. So he's pretty good. Now, what I will say about this guy, he is 250 points. There are some cool combos you can do with him, with hammers and stuff like that. I'm not sure it's worth it, though. I gotta be real. I think he's a cool character. I just don't think he's that good. I definitely think there are better characters, and I definitely think that you can, kind of equip either a Dwarf Lord or a Thane to be more effective than this guy in many situations. But he is cool. And I do really like the Grudge Lore and Grudge Stone kind of combination. Getting hatred against everybody and then becoming unbreakable is really strong. Okay. Next character is Ungrim Iron Fist. Now, I remember Ungrim being probably one of the worst Lord choices in Warhammer Fantasy. He is now one of the best. He is 315 points, so he's barely, and in terms of this game, I know it's a lot, 75 points more than Thorgrim, but that's quite a bit cheap. Well, it's quite a bit cheaper than what you'd expect from what he has. So, weapon skill 9. That's a big deal in this game. That means stuff is often hitting him on 5s. And he's hitting basically everything on a 3+. Basically a 3+. He has toughness 6. So that is going to be more than normal. Again, that's awesome. Initiative 5, another huge buff there, because usually Dwarf Lords have Initiative 4. He has 4 attacks and Leadership 10. He is going to be your king, and he can be a general, which is awesome. He has the Death Blow special rule, Grommeril armor, which, it's funny because he has light armor, but I'll go into why that's fine in a second. The Slayer Crown, light armor, and the Axe of Dargo. Of course, he has a hand weapon as well. He has King of the Slayer Hold, Magic Resistance -2, Rallying Cry, Resolute Slayer, and Unbreakable. King of the Slayer Hold is probably one of the most awesome rules because it allows you to take Doomseekers and Slayers, well, mostly Doomseekers, right? Up to 4 of them per 1,000 points as special choices. You can take 8 of them in a 2,000 point game as long as you stay under the, kind of point percentage. Doomseekers also have something up their sleeve that is very insane, and I'll go into that in a little later in this video. But that's really cool. You can be taken in a Royal Clan army as well, so it's one of the only ways you can get Doomseekers as normal units and not as mercenaries, which means they do not have to roll on the mercenary chart. He is a Slayer, so he always wounds on a 4+ regardless of the unit's toughness. The Slayer Crown gives him +2 to his armor save, so instead of, light armor 6 up, he's getting a 4 up, so he's basically, fighting with full plate. And he gets a 5 up ward save against any wounds suffered, which is awesome. It's 4 up armor save with a ward save, and he has toughness 6, so a lot of things. I'm telling you guys, this guy is stacked. I'd be surprised if he doesn't get nerfed in the future. Okay, now if that wasn't enough, a solid Lord choice with solid, abilities and weapons, he has the following. Oh, one more thing I missed. He can join a unit of hammers or slayers, but if he joins a unit of hammers, they become immune to psychology and unbreakable. So, unbreakable hammers. So remember when I was talking about good old Thorgrim giving hammers unbreakable, and I was like, yeah, it's good, but it's not like the greatest. The reason why I say that is because Ungrim can do the same thing. And you don't have to stop moving for him to be able to do that. The Axe of Dargo is what sets him over the edge for me, personally. Strength +2, AP -3, it's not strikes last, magical attacks, and Monster Slayer. By the way, if you guys don't know what Monster Slayer does, if a monster loses a wound from a weapon with Monster Slayer, it automatically dies, no questions asked. It is removed from play, which is insane. So you hit a unit, let's say you roll your 4 attacks, you get 3 hits, and you get 2 wounds out of that at -3 AP. Even if your opponent has regen and a ward save, if they even miss 1 save out of that, their creature is done. Dragons, dead. Giants, dead. Your opponent has a Gorgon, dead. He will kill any creature that misses their saves. Even one, he will destroy. He's also really good in regular challenges. I mean, having strength 7 and 4 attacks can end most lords and champions and stuff like that. So he's just awesome. He's my favorite character. I think I will buy this model just to have him painted, so that, you know, when I play with the rest of my cardboard army, I will at least have Ungrim Iron Fist as my lord. He is so cool, and I'm so stoked at his rules. I'm really excited to try him out. And just talk about a registered badass right here. Weapon skill 9, guys. Weapon skill 9. Also, for some reason, just randomly magic resistance -2 because he's a Slayer. So good. Okay, let's talk about Burlock Damonson. And, you know, at first I didn't really like this guy, but actually he's grown on me. He can be taken as a lord. He's 85 points, so he's more expensive than a regular Slayer, but his abilities are pretty funny, and his weapons are pretty cool too. So he has prepared positions, so he can entrench a single artillery piece and a unit of Thunders or Quarrelers, which is pretty good. They count as being behind partial cover, and they count as being entrenched. Or, excuse me, defending a lower linear obstacle, which is good. You know, I think that's decent, but once they move, they lose that ability. So, you know, it's probably best for something that's not going to move very much, like a cannon. Range finding optics makes it so that you can either reroll a natural hit roll of 1 or reroll a single artillery dice, and in addition, the unit he has joined does not suffer the usual -1 to hit modifier when shooting at long range. That is why you take this guy. That is extremely powerful. So you can also, remember, upgrade Thunderers to Expeditionary Marksman, and now they can move and shoot with no penalties whatsoever. The only penalties being things like partial cover and heavy cover. That's it. Really good. He, of course, can't be targeted by spells and enemy attacks when within 3 inches of a war machine. And I think the cool part about this guy is that he has some decent combat. His combat strength is based on the artillery dice. So you roll the artillery dice and he gets that much strength at AP -2. He only has 3 attacks, but that's still better than a regular engineer. So, I mean, that can pop a few models. It's kind of neat. And the rivet gun is kind of cool too. It's strength 3, AP -2, but if you roll a hit roll, you get D3 additional attacks with Armor Bane 1. So, I mean, it's okay, right? You don't take them for these things, but they're fun. And that's what's cool. You take them for the range finding optics. You shove them in a unit of Thunderers, a big unit of 20, sit them on a hill in the back, and just fire away. Really good. And by the way, I did some rolls and I did the math on this guy with a unit of Expeditionary Marksmen. Hitting on a 4+, right? 20 of them. You're getting an average of 10 hits. And you're probably going to get 11 or 12 hits with the ability if you use the rerolls of natural ones. Let's say, just, you know, for the sake of argument, that you get just 10. You're rolling on the low side. That's still 5 wounds. And that's 5 wounds at AP -1 and possibly more with Armor Bane. So you're killing a solid 3 or 4 models probably per roll. Which, again, I mean, that's really good, right? I mean, for a unit of Thunderers to do that is unheard of. That's really, when I was complaining about shooting in the very beginning of the edition being terrible, I was talking about how many negative modifiers things like Thunderers had. And I mean, look at any game on YouTube or wherever where people are using Thunderers. Typically, they don't do much, right? They kind of just sit there, they shoot. If they stand still and everything and all the conditions are good, they're fine. But if, you know, your opponent is at long range, if you have to move for whatever reason, Thunderers mostly do nothing. So the fact that this guy just erases all that for you is awesome. Okay, he's cool. He's an auto take in the Expeditionary Force. You got Dwarf Engineer Sappers. Now, at first I wasn't sure why they were so expensive, but then I read their rules. So they can basically take anything that an engineer could take. They're essentially engineers with the following rules. So first of all, they do have this ability Dig In. If they are not engaged in combat, they may attempt with their unit to dig in by taking a leadership test. If the test is passed, the character in the unit they have becomes entrenched. The entrenched unit is considered to be behind partial cover and to be defending a low linear obstacle. I'm just going to say this. GW stole this ability from War Machine Mark II from the Trenchers. That's what they did. Trenchers had an ability like this. They could dig in, and they basically counted as being in cover. Same thing here. So I think this is powerful. It's not necessarily a reason to take this guy, but if you look at the next ability, you might change your mind. Hostile terrain. Any enemy model that ends its movement within the command range, which is going to be 9, of one or more characters with this special rule that are not fleeing or engaged in combat must take a dangerous terrain check. And if you guys don't know what that is, you roll a dice for each model that's in that range. If you roll a 1, it dies. That's pretty powerful. Now, can people get around this by staying just outside of 9 inches? Absolutely. But it's going to increase the odds that the charge is going to fail the next turn, especially because, again, going back up to Burlock here, you can move and shoot with your Thunderers with no penalty. So you can move back a couple inches, shoot them again, and you have a Dwarf Sapper and a Dwarf, you have Burlock in there as well. And essentially that enemy unit is not going to be able to charge if they do that. So they kind of have to get closer if they want to charge you. Really good. I would say maybe take one of these units in your army. Don't take multiple of these. I know it's tempting to, have a whole army of Thunders and Trench and stuff like that, but the only unit that is really good, I think, with, let me put it this way. The only Thunder unit that's worth taking for the points is Burlock's unit. That's just me, though. So yeah, Dwarf Sappers, pretty good. I think probably take one of them in your list. Doom Seekers are one of the most broken models in the entire game. Why are they broken? Well, if you look at their stat line, they don't look that bad, right? 5 weapon skill 5, strength 5, toughness 4, wounds 2, right? They're basically Dragon Slayers, but they're a little stronger. And they have a little less weapon skill. 2d3 attacks, so they're getting more attacks than a Dragon Slayer. And they're about the same amount of points. So far, it looked kind of the same, They have the Whirling Blades of Death. They can take weapon runes up to 50 points. They have Death Blow, Doom Seeker, First to the Fray, Gromero weapons, which of course the Dragon Slayers also have. Hatred, Orcs and Goblins. Impact attacks. Now that is really good. Impact attacks, D3 plus 1. It's going to be at strength 5, their base strength. They have Loner, Magic Resistance -2, random attacks, Resolute, Unbreakable, Vanguard, Whirlwind of Death. The Vanguard is pretty good, gives them an additional 3 inches of movement in the beginning of the game. Here is why they are broken. Doom Seeker. Whoops. Doom Seeker. At the end of the battle, a Doom Seeker that has been slain is worth no victory points. However, if a Doom Seeker is still alive, the enemy player wins a bonus number of victory points equal to 100% of its points cost. This is why it's broken, guys. Your opponent can't really afford, if you put runes on this guy, and if you deck this guy out with runic tattoos, your opponent cannot afford to ignore it. But if your opponent does try to kill him, he's not going to get the victory points for him. And, right? Like, it's a lose-lose situation for your opponent no matter what. He ignores them, he kills stuff. He doesn't ignore him and kills him, he's wasted shots at something he's not going to get victory points for. Right? So, yeah, either way, this ability just basically messes with your opponent's head. First to the Fray is really good as well. When he can make a charge, he gets an additional D3 to his modifier, which is awesome, right? He's moving faster into the battle. Whirlwind of Death. Impact attacks caused by this model use the profile of the Whirling Blades. In addition, when this model makes it to wound roll, a roll of a 4+ is always a success regardless of the target's toughness. He gets his own ability with his impact attacks. Absolutely brilliant. That means he can actually wound tough stuff as well. If you want to throw this guy into a big monster with toughness 7, he can still wound on a 4. Absolutely crazy with the impact attacks. Now, normally they are dogs of war. They can be taken in groups of 3 for the Grand Army rules. So Dwarven Mountain Holds, of course, is your standard build. Up to 3 of them can be taken, and they're mercenaries. Of course, you're going to want to take them in the detachment where they're not mercenaries, because they're going to get +1 strength on charge. They're going to get they're going to get so many cool abilities. Really, I mean, these guys are probably some of the best models in the entire game. I think they're definitely the best solo character in the entire game, aside from like wizards, right? And even then, these guys I think are probably better because they don't count as victory points if they die. Okay. By the way, we will get into more shenanigans when we talk about the runic tattoos, and the runes that these guys can take are just absolutely insane. Oh yeah, and remember, you can take an additional 25 points worth of runes if you're using the Dwarven Royal Clan rules. So instead of 50 points here, it's going to be 75, which means even more, more attacks, more strength, whatever you want to go with. Next up, we have the Royal Clan Dwarfs, Royal Clan Warriors. So these are cool. I think they're really awesome for narrative purposes. I don't actually think they're better than Dwarf Longbeards, and they're kind of competing for Dwarf Longbeards for a core choice. So let's check this out. And along the way, we're going to compare them to Dwarf Longbeards. Now, Dwarf Longbeards will run you, no matter how you build them, will run you 3 extra points per model. They are essentially 13 points because you're going to want to take a shield or a great weapon with a Longbeard, so they're going to be 13 points a model. These already come with shields, so technically you don't need to do that. So Longbeards are going to be 3 more points, but Longbeards get +1 weapon skill, +1 strength, and of course they get some added bonuses. They have the veteran ability, for example, to reroll all leadership tests, and they also get the ability to basically help any unit reroll their panic checks within 6. So what do these guys have? Well, they have Grommeral armor, which is not something that Longbeards have. Longbeards have Grommeral weapons, but not Grommeral armor. These guys have shield walls, so do Longbeards, so that's a wash. These guys have Grommeral great axes, which give them -3 AP base instead of only -2 of a normal great weapon, so that is kind of good. But keep in mind that Longbeards have +1 strength, so realistically speaking, you're sacrificing +1 strength for +1 AP. Situationally, that is better, but it's not going to be better against all targets. In addition, they have to replace their shields with Grommeral axes. They don't just get them, so they're going to be 11 points per model, which only puts them 2 points difference between these guys and Longbeards. The cool thing about these guys is you can give them stubborn, and in addition to drilled. You can also give them veterans, but again, if you do choose to give them all 3 upgrades, you're paying the same cost as the Longbeards. So that is something you have to take into, consideration. What do I think about these guys? Well, they are a core choice, but I realistically think that the extra weapon skill and extra strength, as well as the built-in veteran ability of the Longbeards, is going to win the day. Grommeral armor is good. If you roll a 1, you get to reroll your armor save. But if you're taking the Grommeral great axes, you're only getting a 5 up anyway. Most enemies have at least -1 on their weapons, so you're only going to get a 6 up. That's only going to save you a couple of times a game, so it's really not going to kind of save you that often, whereas weapon skill 5 will save you a bunch, right? This means Longbeards can go into combat with units that are scarier, essentially, Chaos Chosen, and actually do okay against them. These guys will be hit on 3s. They will be wounded probably on 3s as well. And Grommeral armor is not going to do that much against, great weapons or AP -2. So, realistically, I think Royal Clan Warriors, they look cool. They have some cool interactions, cool rules, but I don't think they're as good as Longbeards. And my opinion about Longbeards is that they're good. They're a good core choice. You're probably going to want to take them if you're not running a lot of range. If you're running a melee build, you definitely want Longbeards. But they're nothing special. Longbeards are just your above average core choice, and that's about it. And Royal Clan Warriors, unfortunately, I think having Grommeral armor and, kind of being a little bit cheaper base cost than the Longbeards doesn't really make them worth taking. But again, that's just me. Let me know what you guys think about Royal Clan Warriors in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I think the cool thing, but I want to go back to these guys a second. I think the cool thing is that you can represent them by using the Longbeards and Hammerers kit. So they say here, represented by arming Hammerer models with a mix of hand weapons and shields or with two-handed axes rather than their great hammers. I think that's really cool, right? I think that's awesome conversion potential. Like, if somebody really wants to go into this, I mean, these guys aren't that much worse than Longbeards. I mean, they're really kind of neck and neck in a couple of ways. I just happen to think Longbeards are versatilely, more versatile and, kind of better into a lot of different matchups. But hey, Royal Clan Warriors are still pretty good. I mean, AP minus 3 Great Axes is good against higher armor units that don't have as great of a save. So a good example of this is Empire Greatswords. These guys are actually better, I think, into Empire Greatswords for the points than Longbeards are, just because they have AP minus 3, Strength plus 2, they're still going to wound on 2+, and they still get this extra AP. So, again, there's matchups where these guys would be about the same effectiveness. All right, let's look at Imperial Dwarf Mercenaries. So Imperial Dwarf Mercenaries are basically Dwarf Warriors. They're the same cost as Dwarf Warriors, except they come with light armor instead of heavy armor. So you are paying 1 point for the fact that they are Imperial Mercenaries. Now that may seem horrible, and it is, until you look at the upgrades they can take. They can take great weapons, thrusting spears, crossbows, or handguns. This makes them a versatile unit. They can, basically take anything you want. And I think this is a really good unit for Empire, but I don't think it's a good unit for Dwarves, because we already have units for cheaper that do the same thing. The only exception is the thrusting spears. We do not have anything with thrusting spears, and they're cheap. Look, they're only 1 point a model. I think these are a very defensible unit, and if you want a unit that can still get a lot of attacks off, but be very defensive and hold a flank for you, I think this would be a decent unit to do it for only 9 points, 10 points with shields, which you will take. Well, sorry, 11 points really, because you're going to be... No, sorry, 10 points. Yeah, 10 points. Because you're going to want to take the shield for 9 points and the thrusting spear. Oh, sorry, yeah, you're right. 11 points. You're going to want to take all those. So, you're going to want heavy armor as well for 1 point a model. You can take drilled. You can take veteran. Those are okay. The abilities, they do have shield wall, which is really good with spears. You can take 1 unit of them normally in, the Dwarven Mountain Holds. I think in the other 2 compositions, you can take like 1 unit of these. And I just think they're okay. They're nothing special. I think if you do, take these, I think 11 points a model for, more attacks than Dwarf Warriors are going to get on, if your opponent charges you, they will get more attacks off just because they have spears. I think that's probably the best way to run them. But other than that, I don't think they're that great, to be honest. Okay. Moving on to the Scout Gyrocopter. So this is an interesting one. Now, you're basically taking a normal gyrocopter. It is a little bit more expensive. You are giving it less armor, so instead of a 4-up, it has a 5-up save. But it has some special abilities. Oh, and it also has 1 less toughness. As for its special abilities, it can skirmish. Instead of 1 inch, it can skirmish 3 inches. So what I mean by that is, you can spread them out up to 3 inches, which actually makes them a really good screening unit, but they're kind of expensive for that, so I don't know if that's the best idea with them. The hit and run ability, I think, is kind of situational as well, because you have to win combat. Should it win a round of combat, a unit with this special rule can choose to fall back in good order rather than make a follow-up or pursue move. And again, like I said, I think that's very situational. In what situation is a unit like this going to win combat with something? Right? 2 attacks, hitting on maybe 4s or 3s, but only at strength 4 with no AP, no nothing. I don't know. I don't think it wins combat that often. It does have Vanguard move, which is good. Skirmishers make it a little bit harder to hit against, range attacks and stuff like that. It does also have Fire and Flee, which is nice. Other than that, it really doesn't have much, except the clatter gun has these rules, right? So, as armor bane -1, dwarf crafted, move and shoot, multiple shots d6, and quick shot. You know, I mean, the clatter gun's okay. I remember talking about this in my original dwarf video. I don't think my opinion on this gun has changed. I still think it's crap. But you can take these as a core choice in the Expeditionary Force. So, you know, it is decent in that list. You know, you can take a couple of these. You know, you can take a unit or two of them, you know, one or two of these guys to fill up your points after you take a unit of Longbeards, and you're just kind of looking to fill your core choice. I think Scout Gyrocopters are the way to go about it, basically. You know, and you could even field this. You can, if you want to, you can just field two of them, and just, you know, spread them out 3 inches across, and just have them as a flanking force that can, you know, stop enemies from moving into you. I think that's a really good idea. So yeah, these guys are okay. They're not going to do a lot of damage, but they're definitely a good utility unit for sure. We have dwarf carts now. Now, oh my gosh, dwarf carts. Dwarf carts are probably the best thing to happen to dwarves since, really since, you know, the invention of dwarf ale, which has been around forever. Now, dwarf carts are light chariots. They're strength 4, toughness 5, 3 wounds, so they don't have that many wounds or anything like that, but their abilities are awesome. So check this out. They do have a 5+ save, which is heavy armor. The pony does attack. It does have a hand weapon, which is awesome, and it gets, how many attacks does it get? 1 attack at initiative 3, if you can believe that. You know, so it's a little faster than the average dwarf. Bugman's Cart and Miner's Cart. You can choose one of the upgrades. Now, Bugman's Cart gives a +1 movement to your movement characteristic. So +1 to your move until the end of turn. That's pretty good if you're within 6 of it. That means your army is moving up faster. If you're running a melee army like a Royal Clan force, that's going to be very good. Miner's Cart, however, gives units within 3 the blasting charges special rule. So they're counted as equipped with blasting charges. That's pretty awesome. However, if the dwarf cart is blown up for whatever reason, it does explode, and any unit within 3 suffers d6 strength 3 hits with an AP of -1 in flaming attacks. So, yeah, I mean, it's good. You know, I think the Miner's Cart's pretty good as well, but I think Bugman's Cart's probably better in most cases, because not only does it give +1 movement within 6, but you can also position this thing in such a way that you can kind of bait people into charging the dwarf cart and then just falling back, right? Fleeing through your own unit and just having your dwarfs right there to meet the charge. You know, then your opponent has to redirect and possibly miss the charge because of the dwarf, you know, because of this annoying dwarf cart, which is only 65 points. So I think you definitely take a couple of these units, give your whole army +1 movement, and at the same time be super annoying, you know, positioning these guys in front of your own unit so you don't get charged. I think that's absolutely epic. These guys are really good. And I'm just laughing at this because it's the silliest model in the game. It has to be one of the silliest. A dwarf cart is going to, you know, mess up people's charges and possibly even flank charge them. God, just so silly. But anyway, yeah. I mean, it's not going to break ranks or anything, but it's just so funny, this thing, you know? And it gets D3 impact hits, which is hilarious. Okay. And you can take them you can take them as a rare choice in the Dwarf Mountain Holds Grand Army composition list. Okay, Goblin Hewers are pretty good, but I just think they're like a little bit weird because they're like lesser Ogre guns. So let's look at this. So it's 36-inch range, which is pretty good. Strength 4, AP -1, Armor Bane 1, Cumbersome, Move and Shoot, and Whirling Doom. Unfortunately, this means that if you take one in a, well, I guess it wouldn't matter anyway in these kind of, in that kind of list, in a Expeditionary Force list, because you can't, it's not on the list for something you can take a toughness off to be able to move and shoot. But still, I mean, it doesn't shoot very well. It uses Stone Floor Misfire Table, but yet you only roll 1 dice, 1 artillery dice, and then you add a number of shots equal to the ranks or files, depending on what arc you're in. So let's say you're shooting at a unit with 2 ranks, you're going to get 2d3 additional shots. You still have to roll to hit. Yes, it's, you get, the artillery dice number of shots, but you're probably going to be hitting on fives, or if you're in short range, maybe fours. But still, strength 4, AP minus 1, armor bane 1, it's just not that good, you know? I don't personally like this. I think this is just a worse version of the organ gun, and I'm not really into it. Now, the Slayer crew is a little interesting because they have weapon skill 4, so they're like a slightly better crew, but then they only have one attack. And then they only have hand weapons. They don't have dual hand weapons or great weapons or anything. So, I don't know. Leadership 10, I guess, is a little bit of a buff there, but this is more of a meme unit in my opinion. I think it's fun, but I don't think it's like super good. Okay. Let's go on to the runic tattoos. Now, this is the probably most broken part of this whole thing, aside from Ungrim Iron Fist. And the reason being is these are tattoos you can put on your Slayers for additional points, but they don't count towards the point limit of runic items they can take. So, we're looking here. Doom Seekers can take up to 3 of these, which is pretty insane. Demon Slayers can take up to 2, and Dragon Slayers may take a single one. Now, let's read through some of these together because they're quite powerful. Demon Slayers and Dragon Slayers can take a, kind of rune that gives them a 3+ ward save once they are reduced to their last wound. However, at the end of the battle, a model with this runic tattoo that has been slain is worth no victory points. That's pretty good. If it's still alive, the enemy player wins a number of victory points equal to 100% of its points cost. So it's basically the same thing as the Doom Slayer, or Doom Seeker, I should say, but it's 50 points extra, and it only gives them a 3+ ward save in addition to that. So I don't know if you take this on a Demon or Dragon Slayer, if you can just take a Doom Seeker and have the same ability, but without the ward save. I mean, do we really need the ward save, right? I don't know. I don't think this is worth the 50 points. I would rather take another Doom Seeker, but that's just me. Rune of Endless Battle. In any turn in which a model with this rune tattoo charged, every attack it makes causes an unsaved wound, allows it to immediately make an additional attack. So just to be kind of clear on this, it's every unsaved wound. So when you charge in and let's say your opponent fails 2 armor saves, that's only going to be 2 extra attacks that still have to hit and still have to wound. So is it worth 40 points? I don't personally think so. I think just, for less points, you can have an additional attack. Rune of the Reckless is really good. It gives you +1 to hit, which is insane if you think about it. However, enemy models that target this model during combat also have +1 to hit. This is actually just good. This is good for 2 reasons. 1, you're getting +1 to hit, you're doing more damage yourself. 2, your opponent is able to kill you easier, and therefore are going to score no victory points from the death of the Doomseeker, which is what you're probably going to take this on. I love the Rune of the Reckless. +1 to hit is amazing. Oh, by the way, it gives you Frenzy, so that will give you an extra attack as long as you don't lose combat. So you're going to get 1+ attack usually in the first round of combat, and of course if you happen to win that combat, you will keep Frenzy. Rune of the Hateful gives you Hatred against all enemies. It's good, but, probably not worth just having the extra attack in most cases, especially if you're getting +1 to hit from the Rune of the Reckless. Rune of Grit gives you +1 toughness. You're not going to want to take this because, again, you want your Doom Seekers to die, but you may take this on a Dragon or Demon Slayer. Rune of the Dauntless. This one is definitely something you should get. A model with this runic tattoo must always issue and accept challenges if possible. During a challenge, this model may reroll any failed to hit rolls. Excellent. Excellent for 15 points. Free rerolls. So you don't need Hatred against all enemies for 30 points when you can get this for 15. And yes, you're going to always want to declare challenges if possible against enemy units, because basically what's going to happen is enemy units can't attack into a challenge. So your Doomseeker is going to be able to wail on that character until that character dies or you die. But either way, it's going to stop the enemy unit from doing anything. Rune of Wrath gives you +1 to your attacks for only 15 points. Which is insane, guys. because it's usually about, what is it, 25 points for an additional attack from the Rune of Battle, or whatever it's called, the Rune of Fury. So yeah, pretty good. Warrior's Bane gives you +1 weapon skill. It's good, but it's not the greatest. And then you have Rune of Blazing Fury, which just gives you flaming attacks. So this is the combo that I think is really good on Doomseekers. So if you're going to have just one Doomseeker in your list, give it the Rune of the Reckless. So that gives it +1 attack, +1 to hit on charge, which is pretty good. You're going to give it the Rune of the Dauntless to give it rerolls to hit and challenges. And you're going to give it the Rune of Wrath to give it +1 attack. So you're getting +2 attack, so it's going to be 2d3 +2. You're still going to be able to make impact attacks. You're hitting on a 3+, most likely, or in some cases a 2-up. But, you know, usually a 3-up, especially in challenges. And you're also going to be able to get, you know, just an extra attack as well from excuse me, from Rune of Wrath. Now, on top of this, you can also give your Doomseeker 3 Runes of Fury for an additional 3 attacks. So you can get 2d3 +5, which averages 9 attacks, plus your impact attacks, +1 to hit, and re-rolling all your hits. This guy is an absolute beatstick, and in fact, if you do this kind of build, you don't really have to worry about units attacking you back. Because if a unit doesn't have a champion or doesn't have some sort of character in the unit, you can just annihilate the whole front rank and then just every turn, just absolutely annihilate the front rank. It's really powerful. Now, how much will this cost? Well, it's going to be about 75 points plus, let's see, you got 35, 50... Yeah, 65. Sorry, I can't do math. It's going to be well over 150 points a little bit, but it's still really good for what you're getting. 165 points or 170 points, whatever it is a really good deal. It's a really good deal. So, absolutely. And, you know, some of you maybe think, well, you can't put 3 Runes of Fury on this guy because he only has 50 points worth of runes. But remember, in the Royal Hold rules, you can take 25 extra points of runic weapon. Well, you know, runic weapon runes. Okay, let's go on to the engineer weapon runes. These are really good as well. You can put these on crossbows or handguns. So this one's really good right off the bat. Master Rune of Slaying, 50 points. When making a roll to wound against an enemy who has the Behemoth type, a 3+ is always a success, and an additional gains of multiple wounds D3 special rule. That's really good. It is really expensive though. So, you know, is it worth just, you know, should you just maybe just buy a bolt thrower for 55 points at that point? Maybe, you know? I think it's a good rune, but it's hard to justify taking it if you don't have the extra points. Master Rune of Piercing basically allows your weapon to fire like a bolt thrower, and it gives you +1 strength. This is also good, but it's kind of expensive. And again, like, why not just buy a bolt thrower? It's almost the same amount of points as a bolt thrower. 15 more points, you get a bolt thrower. Master Rune of Bursting Flame causes 2d3 hits against the enemy unit rather than the usual 1. This is really good. Gives you an average of 4 hits instead of 1. It's also not that many extra points. It's a good rune to have, again, but only if you have extra. Rune of Concussive Force is honestly really strong. A unit hit with this gains a Stupidity special rule until the start of the next turn subphase, and that's really good because on a roll of a 1, the unit can't do anything, right? Can't charge, just stumbles forward like an idiot, which is funny. And this could really mess up your opponent's plans, and I think that's worth putting it on, you know, an engineer or something like that for 30 points. Rune of Accuracy, weapon inscribed with this rune does not suffer any negative to hit modifiers. That is really good. But of course, you know, in the Expeditionary Force, that's kind of a given anyway because of the marksman abilities. Rune of Rapid Fire gives you multiple shots too and quick shot. That's pretty good for 15 points. Basically doubles your firepower for very little extra points. The Rune of Molten Steel, a weapon with this rune, gains flaming attacks, not the greatest. I think flaming attacks are overrated this edition. And then Enchanted Rune just gives you magical attacks, which, can help against certain things like wraiths and banshees. Now, how do you combo this? Well, there's a way to basically ensure that your models for a mere 20 points can easily kill things like banshees. And, people at the competitive level are running and spamming banshees. So you put the Enchanted Rune on your gun, you buy an engineer for 50 points. For 5 points, you put the Enchanted Rune on. And then for 15 points, you put the Rune of Rapid Fire on. Or if you're feeling extra, spicy, you can put the Rune of Bursting Flame on. But it is more points. So this will give you multiple shots too and quick shot. So you're going to be able to move and fire and all that with no penalty. You're basically going to be hitting on a 3+ or a, 2+. And, banshees only have 2 wounds. So you hit them twice, you wound them twice because I think banshees are toughness 3, but they might be toughness 4. But I'm pretty sure they're toughness 3. And then they just die. You have a couple of these in your army, and, you can kill a couple banshees per turn. And, at worst, you're killing 1 banshee a turn, and that's still good. So yeah, I think these weapon runes make it very easy for dwarf players to just quickly eliminate those types of models without any problem. Okay, and that's it. That is the Arcane Journal. So what are my thoughts overall on this? Well, I think there's some big power plays, right? First of all, Ungrim Iron Fist with hammers just becomes insane, absolutely insane. So cool. Cool model too. And the good thing about this kind of unit combo is not only do you have Ungrim as a new model, but you have Hammerers, which are also kind of more updated. Whereas, Dwarf Warriors, Dwarf Thunders, Dwarf Quarrelers are kind of older figures with like noticeable gaps, right? Like if you look at their armor and like build, like when you're building them, they have huge gaps, huge gap lines and stuff like that. So they're not the best models to build. And honestly, most of the time, I actually prefer the single stance metal models in fantasy just because of those huge gap lines. Like the plastic that they were using back in like Warhammer like 6th edition or whatever with the new Dwarf Warrior kits was not like the greatest. Okay, so yeah, there's some really powerful stuff. Burlock is really good. I think Thorgrim is kind of a miss. I think they could have made him more powerful. He just feels kind of redundant with Ungrim hanging around. Dwarf Sappers are interesting. Doom Seekers are absolutely broken. I love them. They're so cool. Royal Clan Warriors, I could take them or leave them, but they have a really cool narrative aspect to them, and I would definitely run them and paint them up, and they would look really cool as well. But I think probably just go with Longbeards in most cases if you're playing competitively. Imperial Dwarf Mercenaries, if you can find the models with spears, then they're good. If you can't, then they're probably pretty worthless, Scout Gyrocopters are okay. They're good for filling points for your core choice in an Expeditionary Force. Dwarf Carts are absolutely hilarious, and, they're made of the stuff that makes great memes, and I just think that they're probably going to be in every dwarf list that is competitive. Just giving +1 movement to all your units is so important. Yeah, I can't begin to speak about how good that is, right? And it is during the command phase, so, you could technically even charge, right? If you're within 6, you can get +1 movement to your charge characteristic, I believe, as well. So this is just really good, guys. I mean, the Dwarf Cart, a lot of armies would pay much more for +1 movement than just 65 points, especially in Aura. Goblin Hewers are kind of a meme. They kind of suck. And, I'm not mad at that. They're hard to get anyway, so who cares? Kind of a funny unit, but still kind of stupid, to be honest. Some of the runic tattoo combinations are absolutely insane. I mean, I think they're okay with, like, Demon Slayers and Dragon Slayers. They're pretty balanced. But when you put them on Doom Seekers, who, already don't care if you kill them or not, and you just make them super expensive, it's like, yeah, your opponent can't ignore it. If your opponent ignores your Doomslayer or Doomseeker, then you're going to just absolutely wreck them. And if your opponent does go after your Doomseeker, then your opponent doesn't get victory points from it. You just wasted shots on that thing, right? Or you not even wasted shots, wasted magic, whatever it is. And there's another funny thing to this too, because Doomseekers have magic resistance -2, like all Slayers. So if we go back to Doomseekers real quick. Yeah, magic resistance -2. So, on top of whatever else you're resisting, -2 on top of that. Which isn't much, but it's still funny. It's going to make it harder for people to, kill these guys with like low effort spells. Like if somebody wants to kill one with a fireball, it's going to be a little bit more hard than they think. Yeah, so I honestly just think these guys are really good. And then lastly, the Enchanted Rune and Rune of Rapid Fire combination, killing stuff like Banshees, if you're having trouble against those ethereal models, oh my god, just talk about a quick solution to something that dwarfs had no answer to before, right? Aside from cannons. And, you really didn't want to waste a cannon shot on a Banshee if you could help it, So, yeah, I think this is fantastic. I think it's great. I think overall, the Arcane Journal is pretty awesome. There's a few units, like I said, that are just kind of like whatever. Like, I think the only really bad unit, in my opinion, is the Dwarf Imperial Mercenaries or whatever. Other than that, I think most of them are usable or just really good. Right? Thorgrim is usable. He's just not the best. Ungrim Iron Fist is the best. He's undisputed. He's the absolute GOAT. Burlock is good. God. So, really excited to kind of try out some of these new lists. I am going to make a video later on covering both the Expeditionary Force and the Royal Mountain Holds. Or I should say Royal Clan. I think I've been saying it wrong this whole time. Sorry, guys. The Royal Clan. I'm going to make full lists for those, and I'm going to try them both out and let you guys know what I think about them. Personally, I think the Royal Clan is going to be better, but the Expeditionary Force has some interesting things as well. I'm going to be running triple organ gun, I know that. I'm probably going to be running a cannon with them as well, because cannons are good with them. And I'll try to run a unit of 20, miners and a unit of 20 thunders and see how it goes. And, whatever gyrocopters I can fit in there as well to move block. And if I can throw some Doom Seekers in there, I'll probably put them in there also. So yeah, it's going to be a fun time, guys. And, thanks for watching. I know fantasy content isn't what people come for a lot of the times, but, I do want to do some fantasy content on this channel as well. Dwarfs were my first, Warhammer fantasy army, and I want to continue them into Old World as much as I can. So yeah. Let me know what you guys think about the Arcane Journal. I personally think it's OP, but let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I will see you guys next time. And I once again want to thank all my patrons and supporters for supporting the channel over the last almost 2 years now. Your support has meant so much to me and has helped the channel improve so much. So thank you. If you do want to help support the channel, I have free trials on my Patreon open for you guys, which will grant you permanent access to our Discord community, which is a community of Eldar players and enthusiasts who love talking about strategies, tactics, and of course hobbying. We are looking to expand into Old World as well, so feel free to join for some Old World action. Trying to get some tabletop simulator games into Old World as well, but I'm still kind of figuring and tinkering with it because the app or the download that I use, well, I guess I should say the mod that I use for it is kind of hard to use. So trying to do that. But yeah, anyway, have a good one, you guys, and I'll see you later next time with a video on D-Cannons. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.